Welcome to the Miller Report. Today's guest caught my attention while watching the New York City's mayoral debate. He graduated magna cum laude from Harvard and has earned an MBA from there. He helped launch Teach for America. He's been involved in private equity, hedge funds, and has also supported minority and inner city entrepreneurs. He authored multiple books and is now running for mayor of New York. And when I was watching the debate last week, I was so captured by his energy and his intelligence. And I said, this guy, I need to talk to him. And I'm so flattered that he agreed just a few days later to come talk to us here on the Miller Report. So let's welcome Whitney Tilson to the Miller Report. Thank you so much for coming here, and we have a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
So you're not new to this. You've done a few debates before. Jonna had you sitting up differently to make sure you stood up straight, but you said, I've done this a few times, and I want to congratulate you on your performance last week, and I think you did do a wonderful job. And the city really is in a very tight up or down position. Just before you, who left the building, the last guest on the Miller Report was a guest named Marianne Tai, who is the CEO of CBRE Tri-State, and she brings a lot of corporations in here, and we're talking about this city and how great it has been and all the companies that are here. And there's a demand for office space. You can't get a new lease in New York, a trophy building, till 2031. And that's amazing for New York, but it could all fall apart. It could fall apart as quick as it started with the wrong political leader. So that's why we need to talk to you today. I want your take on it, and let's start. So I know you're running as a Democrat. You're also running as someone who comes from the world outside of politics. During the debate, you showed us this. Share with our audience what brought you to the place of wanting to win and be the mayor of the most important city in the world.
Well, I joke, a burst of momentary insanity after the election last year. But I'm a lifelong Democrat and been a Democratic activist in the party, trying to drag my party into a centrist, sensible, business-oriented, but, with a big heart. I believe in a strong social safety net, the core principles of the Democratic Party. But in this city and state where we've become a one-party city and state, I think my party's gotten hijacked by extremists. And so I saw a field of a bunch of career politicians and saw my city head in the wrong direction. I love this city. I've raised 3 kids here over the past 30 plus years. And so decided to throw my hat in the ring to give voters a choice, an outsider, someone who's a business person and a philanthropist, not a politician.
As you've probably have seen on the Miller Report, we've pretty much interviewed every single candidate. They've been on this show. And one of the candidates has described the city as far left, Democratic, Republican, and far right. Do you agree with that, and where do you stand?
Well, statistically speaking, with the city has 2/3 of New York City residents are registered Democrats, only 11% registered Republicans. You got 22% independents who unfortunately can't vote in the Democratic primary. So it's very likely whoever wins this primary coming up on June 24th, early voting just starts in a few days. There's 9 days of early voting, is likely to be our next mayor. And I think we're at a critical time. I think it's a perilous moment for our city where, we can stay as a city of capitalism and dynamism and entrepreneurship, or, go in the path of what I view as radical socialism. So I'm really worried.
Me too. Let's talk about the current administration. What do you think Mayor Adams has done well, and what is something you would like to continue if you become the mayor?
Well, I would keep his police commissioner, Jessica Tisch, his 4th police commissioner in 3 years, shame on him, but I think he's finally got a good one. She has cleaned out a lot of the cronyism and corruption at the top, which I hold Mayor Adams accountable for, but he has been supporting her to his credit. She has got more cops out onto the streets, is enforcing lower level quality of life crimes, and murders are down 28% this year. Shootings are down 21%. 6 of the 7 major felonies are down this year. So I'm optimistic that after 5 years of going in the wrong direction, we're finally headed in the right direction. I give Jessica Tisch credit for it. So that would certainly be one major area that I would keep his person in place.
And what is the one thing you'd like to improve right away?
Well, the cronyism and corruption has just infected the whole city government. Mayor Adams was one of the people I ranked last time. I had high hopes for him as a law and order kind of guy, a former police officer or detective himself. And he's just been such a disappointment. And he's the most unpopular mayor in New York City recorded polling history, I think deservedly so.
When you say corrupt, what do you mean?
Well, he's under 5 federal indictments, and it would probably be a lot more had Trump not instructed the ADA here, not ADA, but the Southern District here, to not file additional charges. So I've read the indictment, and some of it is sort of ticky-tack stuff. You know, if you're going to be corrupt in New York, you should do it right. And he was selling out, his office for first-class airline tickets. So,
well, I think everybody will go on. If you're a mayor, you can go first class.
Right.
So let's move on from that, because I disagree with that, and I think that you should get some privileges if you are the mayor and working that hard.
Yes.
Particularly getting on a first-class airplane. Let's move on to the school system, which I know you are big proponent of. If you were the mayor, how would you break the mold and recast the way we currently educate our children?
Yeah, well, this has been my life's mission, really. As you mentioned, I think in your introduction, I was one of the founders of Teach for America coming out of college. My first job right here in New York City 36 years ago. Been on the board of KIPP charter schools here for 20 plus years. And so I've seen up close for decades how we spend way too much and get way too little in our system. We're spending almost $40,000 a kid. That's $1 million for a family with 2 kids in the school system, K through 12. And trust me, that family isn't getting $1 million worth of education. In fact, in this city, our kids are reading at a level below those of Mississippi, the poorest state in the country that spends $12,000 a kid. So what would I do? Fight to keep mayoral control. I think that's critical, and where most of the other Democratic candidates want to go back to the chaos of local school boards and all. Bring in a real reform-oriented schools chancellor like Mayor Bloomberg did with Joel Klein. I would end social promotion in 3rd grade, which means if we used to have, if they fail, they don't get forward. If after 5 years of being in the system, a child still cannot read, I think the school system has to try again. And I think this is a way to force the system to serve kids, mostly low-income minority kids, disproportionately, who the school system is really failing. I would also expand great schools, including charter schools. I've been a real advocate of charter schools, which are doing overall. We have a fabulous charter sector educating about 15% of our public school kids. And here's the thing. I want the same accountability that we're responsible for at KIPP, where every 5 years, every one of our 18 schools gets evaluated by our authorizer, and we have to demonstrate that we're delivering for kids, or we'll get put on probation or shut down. My question is, why doesn't that happen with the other 85% of public schools, where there's few rewards for success and no consequences for failure? I think a lot of people agree with you with the charter schools, but how are you going to handle the budget if you're going to go to charter schools now? How is that going to affect our budget? Well, keep in mind, charter schools are regular public schools. They are open admission. They are, in fact, funded at a lower level than regular public schools. We locate, for example, KIPP in the poorest neighborhoods in New York City that most need good schools and give parents options. So, I don't think it's a budgetary issue. I think we just have 2 different flavors of public schools. What about the teachers union? Well, they are very threatened by charter schools, and I have been doing battle with them for decades. In fact, I founded a political organization called Democrats for Education Reform to try and support Democrats who are willing to break with teacher unions on issues and put children's interests first. If I were to summarize the big problem with our school system, it's run by and for adults, not children. Do you have any personal experience with Donald Trump? Have you ever met him? I've never met him. I've studied him closely. What does that mean? I've read a lot of books about him and followed him. I'm an avid consumer of the news, and he has dominated the news since 10 years ago this week that he came down the escalator and announced his candidacy. So what realistic options does any mayor have in dealing with the President of the United States if they pressure them? Well, I'm a pragmatist. I have been very concerned in fighting Trump and Trumpism for 10 years. But my job as mayor of New York is to serve the people of New York. About 10% of our city budget is federal funding in many critical areas, from infrastructure to schools, et cetera. So I would try and be a pragmatist. In areas, though, where Trump tries to bully the city and get the mayor to sell out the interests of New Yorkers for his agenda, I would stand up strong to him. And sometimes that means suing him, where he, for example, Congress controls federal spending. So I believe it is an unconstitutional action when he is cutting off funds as the executive. That is, by Constitution, the job of Congress. And so when he acts in an unconstitutional way and he gets sued, recently he's been losing well over 90% of those suits.
Don't you think it's in the best interest of a city if the mayor and the president are getting along?
Yes. And so my first option would be to strike a deal with a guy who wrote The Art of the Deal, but not in a way that sells out the interests of New Yorkers or my principles or what New Yorkers elected me for.
I bring this up because I go back to the Mayor Adams situation. Actually, he was here at the Miller Report when they took his phone on his way here.
Oh, really?
So how do you think he should have handled that differently?
I think Mayor Adams struck a deal to keep himself out of prison.
I mean with Biden.
What specifically are you referring to?
I'm referring to he wasn't playing ball, and a lot of these accusations started to come down on our mayor, and I think it was because he wasn't playing ball with the current president.
I
if
understand.
you were the mayor and this
Yes.
happened to you, what would you do different, and how do you think he should have been different, or how do you think he handled that?
Well, I guess the difference is I think Mayor Adams was in fact guilty of what he was charged with. And
I could find something guilty with everything you've done. I don't like the color of your suit. I think you got it and you didn't pay tariffs. Come on.
I don't buy that narrative. I'm squeaky clean. And so if Trump tries to bully me by bringing up charges, if I'm mayor, I would fight those because I know I'm innocent. Whereas in this case, I think Mayor Adams did the things he's accused of.
Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about your alma mater. You've been an outspoken critic of Harvard's response to anti-Semitism on campuses. What are your thoughts on the president's decision to pull federal funding from there?
I am shocked and appalled by two things. First, by Harvard's response after October 7th and failing to crack down on just rampant anti-Semitism on campus, and that created a very unsafe environment for Jewish students there. It's something I feel strongly about personally because my wife and daughters are Jewish. I have a daughter graduating from college, in fact, on Saturday, so in just a few days.
Which college?
Carleton College out in Minnesota, which fortunately, other than a noxious anti-Semitic email that went out for students from the local chapter of Students for Justice for Palestine, she has not had to experience what students at Harvard and Columbia and other bigger East Coast institutions have had to. So I have been very strongly critical of Harvard. I'm glad they replaced President Claudine Gay, and current President Garber seems to be doing a better job from what I hear. I am equally appalled, though, at the Trump administration using the guise of fighting anti-Semitism to basically engage in a political attack against an institution that it views as, a left-wing enemy. And so I think the Trump administration's gone way too far, and I'm glad that Harvard is suing and fighting what the Trump administration is doing.
That sounds like an oxymoron.
It is possible to be appalled with both sides, I would argue.
So what about the other campuses? What about Columbia? What about, do you think this is just Harvard?
No, it's not. In fact, just before I came on here with you, I had a call with two students who are actually joining me at the debate in the audience, who are Jewish students at Columbia who have experienced their education disrupted, being forced to evacuate the library during finals because of loud protests and protesters invading the library, all the way up to physically assaulted, harassed, punched in the face by some of these protesters. So it's clearly much more widespread.
And you're not thankful that President Trump is trying to curtail this?
I am absolutely in favor of trying to curtail it, but some of the steps he's taken by banning all international students, cutting scientific funding, that's...
Where do you stop?
Well, I would stop well before those points.
Well, it certainly wasn't stopped in the last administration.
I think I asked these students at Columbia, is the administration responding since, the real chaos a year ago or so? And they said they could do more, but they are responding. And so, again, I think this is an area where I'm glad there's a lot of pressure on these universities. I've been very critical of them, but I think trying to bankrupt them, trying to ban overnight all international students, cutting scientific funding when, what does that have to do with fighting anti-Semitism, right? It's illegal, unconstitutional bullying, in my opinion. The Trump administration's gone too far.
I agree with you, and as a journalist, I probably shouldn't give my opinion, but I will, for the record. The projects, research, Alzheimer's, cancer, that should not be cut. But we are united as Americans, and the president is trying to help us. So if we make statements that he's not doing a good job or that we're split, doesn't help the united part. Just put that in there. Let's move on. You've been on the record as believing Michael Bloomberg was the best mayor of our lifetime. Yesterday, he just supported Cuomo. What is your opinion on that? And what is your opinion of Michael Bloomberg? And why did you think he was effective?
Well, Michael Bloomberg was independent of the political machine, didn't need the job, and had decades of business experience. And so in many ways, he was the role model, pioneered how an outsider could come in and become mayor. And he, in almost every area, I think, did a fabulous job. I worked with his administration closely, in particular, in the school system. And for example, the most critical, if you gave me one educational metric, I would say is fourth grade reading. And the kids who are in the lowest below basic category, coming in to fourth grade, it's basically game over for them. And so that's a critical metric that when Bloomberg took office 23 years ago, 53% of New York City public school kids were testing, fourth graders were testing below basic. He dropped that number steadily over his dozen years down to 37%. Since then, it's back up to 46% without, a strong leader there. So the other part of your question, I guess, you asked, what is your opinion of his
supporting for Cuomo?
Yeah, I was not surprised, and they have a long relationship going back to when he was mayor and Cuomo was governor. And I think Mike Bloomberg is a pragmatist and believes that whatever you think of Andrew Cuomo, Zohran Mamdani, who's polling a close second and closing the gap, is a much bigger danger. And a 33-year-old inexperienced radical socialist taking control of this city would ruin it.
Would ruin the city?
Yes.
So are you in agreement with Michael Bloomberg as far as between the two of them?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I personally would wish that he said, vote Whitney 1 and Cuomo 2. But if the polls are right that it comes down to those two candidates, I think it's very clear that Mamdani is the far greater risk to this city.
We're going to go back to that in a moment. I do want to ask you about the bikes, because I know that you're a bike rider.
Yes, and I rode my bike here. It's parked right outside.
Is another question that was asked at the debate. I mean, I live in Midtown, and the bikes sometimes run me over. As a bicyclist, have you ever been at risk?
Oh, I've been doored a couple times, thrown from my bike, and just a year ago was actually crossing in a crosswalk with a red light. A car, I would assume the guy was probably distracted looking at his phone or whatever, was just blowing down Park Avenue at 90th Street. And he saw me, and I fortunately have very bright lights on my helmet and on my bike. And that probably saved my life, because he got to the brakes in the nick of time and he actually hit me, but he had braked enough that it didn't injure me.
Do you actually think that powered vehicles should even be in bike lanes?
Well, the whole point of a bike lane is, by definition, when you say powered vehicles, you mean like an electric bike or one of the delivery bikes as opposed to an automobile. My belief is that electric bikes, delivery bikes or city bikes, should be speed limited to 15 miles an hour. And that's an easy programmable thing where you can't go faster than 15 miles an hour. And actually, I've been calling for that for months, and I was pleased to see Mayor Adams just echoed that for city bikes. But I think that should apply to all electric vehicles, especially these big, heavy delivery bikes, which are even more dangerous.
Speaking of safety, when watching the debate, every candidate said they wanted to increase the police, never defund the police. You all said it in different ways, except for one.
Except Zoran.
Except Zoran. If you were the mayor, how would you increase the size of the police force without exploding the budget?
Yeah, it'll take time. It's not something that can happen overnight. We're talking about 34,000 cops, and we've gotten to the position we are today, down about 5,000 cops from the peak, because 200 cops retire every month, and they're only replaced by 100 every month. So you're basically that number's dwindling by about 100 cops net per month. So you got to reverse that. Jessica Tisch has taken some steps in that direction. She's changed the standards to apply to be a police officer, where you don't need quite as many college credits. And I've talked to a number of cops who are like, that's a smart thing, because there's no correlation between
Do they want to be
cop.
cops? Do people want to become a cop?
Well, over the past 5 years, the number of people applying to enter the police academy has declined from 18,000 a year to 8,000 a year. And you want the police to be highly selective.
Why would you want to be a policeman? You can't even put somebody in jail.
Well, that's a big part. I just talked with a big part of it. I just talked to someone in Midtown North. I happened to be out there canvassing and bumped into a woman. Lo and behold, she's a 17-year cop. Works in Midtown North, and she said they've gone from 300 cops staffing that precinct to 120. And then I said, well, that's crazy. You can't do your job of protecting people. And she said, we're working crazy overtime, so it's very demoralizing. And then I said, any other issues? And she said, yeah, we have to fill out so much paperwork anytime we make an arrest that the criminal is back out onto the streets before we finish the paperwork. So there's an issue there about the city council passing legislation that went too far and requiring all this onerous paperwork. So you got cops doing paperwork instead of out there on the streets protecting us. And secondly, a criminal justice system and a DA's office that's created a revolving door where cops do their job, even when they have the staffing and do their job and arrest someone committing a crime, that there are no consequences and the criminal's right back out on the streets.
So where would you get the funds from?
One, we're still a growing economy, and so there's funding increasing there. I think that when I look at our $116 billion city budget, I see we spend more in every area than any peer I can find in any city in the U.S. or overseas. So the 155 people I hired to run New York City, first and foremost, their job is to deliver better services, better education, better policing, et cetera. But secondly, find me waste and fat. So this is not Elon Musk and a bunch of 19-year-olds.
Are you part of Doge?
Coming in here with Doge. It's doing it with a scalpel from people who know where the skeletons are buried, people with knowledge of these institutions, and how can we find savings without sacrificing the services to New Yorkers.
I'm trying to ask, Whitney, for one specific area that you would cut the funds from to give more money to the police.
Yeah. I don't have one specific area. What I will say is that when times got tight during the global financial crisis under Mike Bloomberg, in back-to-back years, he cut the overall city budget, and it was pretty much across the board. Every department had to find savings of 2.7% in 2008, 4.4% in 2009. Yet, because he was a good manager and had good people running it, city services didn't deteriorate
So
materially.
we can't balance the budget here, is what you're saying.
Well, we have to balance the budget, but I think, and I'm also worried with Trump budget, the cuts that might come through Congress and a possible recession, we may need a manager who has to do what Mike Bloomberg did in 08 and 09.
You think that could be Zoran?
No.
We'll get back to that.
No.
I consider myself as an expert in real estate, and this city has a huge housing crisis. Everybody could agree on that. We lack affordable housing. We need the affordability for the policemen to have homes, for the teachers, for the sanitation, for the middle industry, or we will not be able to keep this city going. what is your plan? I could not understand. Everybody, all the candidates came up and agreed that we need it, but nobody gave us a concrete answer.
Right. Well,
what would you do?
If I were to characterize all of their answers, they were basically governmental solutions. And my view is, I suppose not surprisingly, given my background, is we need to unleash the private sector to solve this problem. I know a lot of real estate people, as you do, and the consistent comment I hear is they treat us like the enemy. The words real estate developer or investor is considered pejorative in much of the Democratic Party. And I was like, no, you guys don't get it. This is our problem. We have created such a hostile and overregulated environment here in the city that a lot of them go look at Jersey City, Hoboken, and Newark. That's where they're going.
They're doing well.
There's tons of construction going on there. And I was like, it should be happening here. So how do you do that? How do you unleash the private sector? Because really it's a supply problem. You want a demand problem. A lot of people want to live in New York. It's an incredible city. And so to solve the supply problem, you start with zoning regs, which City of Yes was a step in the right direction toward easing those, but we need to go a lot further. Everyone tells me that is 10 or 20% of what we need. You need to properly staff and have just a change in attitude at the city's departments of housing preservation, development, buildings, et cetera, that just snarl things up. The whole land use review process, the ULURP process, has 6 different steps, and each step takes many months. So I think we need more public-private partnerships. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with the infill development between NYCHA and Related down near Hudson Yards. So overall, what used to be 2 years start to finish for an average development under Bloomberg has now morphed into a 4-year beast. And when that's 2 years of additional carrying costs, of cost of capital with higher interest rates today, it makes real estate development infeasible. Then you had the loss of the state tax credit program, 421A, which has been replaced by
485X.
485X, which you're seeing, which has this crazy clause in it that if you're building anything over 100 units...
Over 30. It's over 30.
Okay, well, there may be a couple different things, but you're required to pay prevailing wage, dramatically increase the costs, so you're getting a lot of developments with 29 units or 99 units.
And you have to keep the rents frozen, as Mandani wants to do forever on the rent-stabilized apartments when building. So as a developer, they are taking away any motivation to have somebody build. So you're in favor of private developers because there are about 100,000 warehoused apartments now that developers will not put on the market. They will not build because they're not going to make any money. They're not going to build it.
Yes.
So you are in favor of changing the laws to make it more attractive to bring development into New York.
Absolutely. And just speeding up the process.
So this is common sense. I like your common sense.
And this isn't pie in the sky. Austin, Texas in 2021, coming out of the pandemic, was a hot city, lots of people moving there. Supply didn't keep up, and in 1 year, rents jumped 25%. The leadership in Austin, the political and business leadership, changed their zoning rules very quickly, allowed building higher buildings on new construction for single-family homes, changed lot size from 5,500 square feet to 1,700 square feet. So you could build 3 smaller, more affordable homes on a lot that used to only be zoned for 1 home. Within 2 years, supply went up by 15%, rents dropped by 22%, housing prices dropped by 21%, and this all happened in the last 3 years. So I don't want to just stabilize rents. I want rents in the city to drop 20%.
Well, this is it's music to my ears because obviously if there is no supply, the prices are going to go up. So we need supply in order to fulfill the price issue.
Right. We're at a 1.4% vacancy rate in the city, the lowest level in 60 years, and we're still making it impossible to build new supply.
Well,
because trust me, developers want to invest in the richest city in the world with a 1.4% vacancy rate.
Well, we do have one candidate who's running on the platform of a rent freeze, a rent freeze on 1 million rent-regulated apartments. So if we have 1 million rent-regulated apartments, if 2 people live in those homes, that's 2 million people. I said this on my last discussion with Marianne 5 minutes ago. So you have 2 million voters, but only 1 million came out to vote in the last election, and only 500,000 came out to vote in the primary. I want you to speak candidly. For a moment, I want you to talk as if you're not running. Just as trying to put a different hat on as a native New Yorker that cares about this city, about the idea that we're going to freeze rents and get the votes of those people that may vote out of their pocketbook on a one-issue election.
Right.
A one-issue vote.
Well, we can do the math that there are far more tenants than landlords, and therefore it's politically popular to say, I'm going to freeze your rent for 4 years. What the average person, I think, doesn't appreciate is when landlords' costs, their labor costs, their insurance costs, et cetera, are going up, if they can't raise rate, and we're talking 2 or 3% a year. We're not talking some sudden doubling of rent for people, but if you what happens is buildings fall into disrepair. When apartments go vacant, landlords can't rehab the apartments, put them back on the market, hence the padlocked apartments that you talked about. So it's hard for the average person to understand, but if you understand sort of economics, incentives, landlords are investors. They can choose to invest their money elsewhere if they can't get a return on investing in their buildings. This rent freeze proposal will actually make our housing crisis worse.
And what about the anti-Semitism and his seemingly anti-Semitic views? How will that affect New York?
I think very negatively. Over 1 million of New York City's 8.5 million residents are Jewish, including my family, as I mentioned earlier. And Zohran Mamdani, from his very political beginnings, has proudly been leading the charge against Israel. He has an obsession with it. He has refused to accept Israel as a Jewish state, to acknowledge its right to exist as a Jewish state. He has used inflammatory and false words, I think, like genocide and apartheid, accusing Israel of these things. He has led the BDS movement, which I believe is fundamentally anti-Semitic because it is only aimed at the world's sole Jewish state. So he has, it's ironic because I've seen him up on the debate stage and he smiles and says, oh, I'm just a humanitarian and I'm, care about human suffering, which I do too. But he only focuses on attacking Israel for its transgressions and the suffering that is a cause that is happening in Gaza, nowhere else. So he is... I have not accused him personally of being anti-Semitic, but he sure hobnobs with a lot of them.
So, as before you came here, I checked the latest poll, and we're so seemingly close between Cuomo and Mamdani. Would you consider wrapping it up and giving your support to Cuomo just in the hopes of being like Ramos did to see that Mamdani doesn't win?
Yes. Well, I couldn't withdraw from the race if I wanted, because I would have to give back all the city matching funding and all. But candidates are allowed to cross-endorse in our ranked choice system. I entered this race to win, and I'm asking people to vote me first. But I'm also a pragmatist, and if the polls are right, and if it comes down to 2 finalists, the way ranked choice voting works, I believe it is most important to stop Mamdani, so you should rank Cuomo somewhere. As long as you rank Cuomo above Mamdani, if you rank me first and Cuomo second, or me first and Scott Stringer and Ramos and Myrie, and put Cuomo fifth, as long as Mamdani isn't on your ballot, as the other candidates are knocked out the way ranked choice voting works, Cuomo will get that vote. And so I've been quite clear that I'm an ABZ, anyone but Zohran.
Would you tell our audience to put you first and Cuomo second?
Sure.
So can we state that?
Yes.
Can you state that for the record?
Yes.
Let's hear it from you.
Everyone listening here, vote me first and vote Cuomo second, and don't rank Mamdani.
Well, I appreciate your love for New York, your intelligence, and the way you debate, and you're a fighter, and never bet against New York. That's my tagline, and I do believe that we're going to win. So that's a wrap. Thank you so much for coming on the Miller Report.